High in the frozen mountains, a police dog suddenly refused to move, barking furiously at a patch of untouched snow near a military camp. At first, the soldiers thought it was nothing, but when they started digging, they uncovered something that had been hidden for decades. What was inside that snow-covered container stunned everyone who saw it, and the question is, why was it buried there in the first place? Here's the full story, but before we continue, drop where are you watching this video from in the comments below and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next mystery. Trust me, what's coming next will leave you holding your breath. Snow lay thick over the mountains, stretching endlessly like a wide ocean frozen in time. The wind moved across the ridges with a whistle that carried both silence and warning, the kind of sound that unsettled those unaccustomed to it. At the heart of this desolate height stood a military camp, steel and canvas pressed against the winter, engines humming low to fight off the bite of cold. Soldiers moved about in routine, their boots crunching the snow, their rifles slung with practiced weight. To the eye, everything seemed ordinary, but something lingered in the air, an unspoken disturbance waiting to be named. It was the camp's police dog that first sensed it. Trained to detect the faintest traces of threat, his instincts sharpened by endless drills, he suddenly grew restless. His ears twitched toward the snow beyond the camp's perimeter, his body rigid, nose cutting through the icy air. Without warning, his bark split the quiet. One bark, then another, relentless, echoing against the cold mountain walls. The soldiers glanced over, thinking it was nothing more than wildlife shifting in the distance. But the dog did not relent. His body pressed forward, harnessed taut against the handler's arm. Each bark carried urgency, an unyielding demand that could not be dismissed. Something was there beneath the snow, something the eye could not see, but the dog could feel with absolute certainty. The handler pulled him closer, attempting to redirect his focus, yet the animal lunged again, paws clawing at the crusted snow, his breath forming clouds in the icy air. His behavior was not random. The soldiers had seen him in action before. They knew this bark. It was the bark that signaled a hidden truth. A few of them gathered, looking out toward the ridge where the dog was fixed. The snow drifted thick in that area, untouched by boots or tires, lying undisturbed as though holding a secret. The barking intensified, each sound ricocheting like a signal flare through the camp. Questions began to rise. Why here? Why now? The camp had been quiet for weeks, supply chains running steady, no disturbances on the mountain trails, yet the dog was insistent, as if he alone could see what the snow worked so hard to conceal. The commander gave a cautious nod, and a small group moved toward the spot. The dog pulled harder now, dragging his handler across the hardened snow, nose pressed close to the surface, paws scratching. His claws tore at the frozen crust, breaking apart the thin veil of white, sending shards flying. But beneath that first layer, nothing appeared. Only more snow compacted deeper. Still, the dog refused to stop. The soldiers exchanged glances. They knew well enough that ignoring an alert was never an option. The mountains had their share of hidden dangers, concealed caches, buried traps, or worse, things left behind by those who traveled these trails long before the military set up camp. With shovels, they began to dig, the sound of metal cutting through snow echoing alongside the dog's furious bark. Minutes turned into an hour. The snow went deeper than they expected, and the ground beneath seemed oddly uneven, as if hollow in sections. The air grew heavier with every stroke, as though the mountain itself was resisting their search. Sweat formed under their gear despite the cold, their breaths rising in bursts of white fog. Yet still there was nothing but layers of ice and snow. Doubt crept in, but the dog silenced it with one more frantic surge. His entire body lowered, head pressed tight, barking into the ground itself. He began to paw furiously, ignoring his handler's attempts to steady him. His body shook with determination, every muscle straining, his movements almost desperate. He knew something was there. He had smelled it, something buried deep beneath this mountain skin. Then came the sound, a hollow thud beneath the shovel, metal striking against something that was not earth or stone. The soldiers froze. The dog barked louder than ever, his voice slicing through the silence. The men cleared more snow, the hollow sound repeating with each strike. Soon the outline began to emerge. Not natural, not rock, something crafted by human hands. The shape was rectangular, edges sharp even under the crust of ice. It looked like a buried container, large enough to hold more than supplies. Its surface was corroded with rust and frost, as if it had been hidden for years, maybe decades. The realization spread through the group like wildfire. They had not just uncovered snow, they had stumbled upon something deliberately concealed. The camp grew tense. The wind howled louder now, whipping snow against their faces as if warning them to stop. Yet no one moved back. The soldiers knew they had crossed into something they could not abandon. The dog's bark grew almost victorious, tail rigid, eyes locked on the object. He had brought them here for this, to this precise spot. But questions swarmed in their minds. Who buried it? What lay inside? Why had it been hidden here, so close to a military camp yet undisturbed for so long? Each question tied itself to the next, forming a chain of uncertainty that weighed heavily over the men. They worked quickly, clearing snow until the full container stood revealed. Its size was staggering, large enough to carry equipment or even something darker. The soldiers pressed their hands against its frozen surface, feeling the age, the secrecy, the stories it carried. But opening it would not be simple. The latches were locked, sealed with layers of ice, refusing to yield to their efforts. The dog barked harder, circling the container as though urging them to push further, to not stop now. He pawed at the edges, his movements frantic, his instincts screaming that the answer was within. The night began to fall over the mountains, shadows stretching long across the snow. The camp was alive with tension. Soldiers gathered in hushed silence around the find, their minds racing with possibilities. They had no clear answer, only the certainty that whatever was hidden beneath had been meant to stay undiscovered. Yet the dog had changed that. He had broken the silence of the mountain, forcing the truth into light. And as the first torchlight flickered across the frozen container, reflecting off the rust and ice, the sense of suspense deepened. They knew they had found something that would alter the course of the days ahead. The dog sat at its edge, chest rising, breath steaming in the cold, eyes unblinking on the object. He had led them here. Now all that remained was to uncover what the snow had guarded so fiercely. The mystery had only begun. The mountain night pressed heavy over the camp, darker than usual, as though the sky itself leaned closer to witness what had been uncovered. The soldiers stood in a circle around the object buried in snow, their torches casting wavering beams over the frozen surface. The container, metallic and immense, seemed to pulse under the light, its rusted sides breathing history that none of them could yet decipher. The police dog refused to rest. His paws shifted constantly, circling the find with eyes locked on its seams. His body vibrated with energy, a living compass that pointed unerringly toward the mystery beneath. Every now and then he let out a sharp bark, not out of impatience, but as if demanding the men not waste a second. The snow had kept this secret long enough. Shovels and picks tore at the hardened edges around the container, breaking free the last of the icy grip. Their hands burned with cold, muscles stiff, but determination replaced fatigue. This was no ordinary find. The way the dog had insisted, the way the sound had hollowed beneath their shovels, the sheer weight of secrecy, all of it told them this mattered. Finally, the latches came into view. They were thick, corroded, coated in layers of frost that clung stubbornly even when scraped with blades. It was clear someone had locked this away, not just with metal, but with intention. The men exchanged uneasy glances. A container of this size, hidden deliberately beneath the snow, raised questions they could not answer. Was it weaponry, long forgotten? Was it evidence of something darker, something meant never to be seen again? The dog pressed his nose against one edge, sniffing deeply, his breath fogging the ice. His body stiffened, ears sharp. Then he barked once more, short, urgent, unlike before. It was not just a call for discovery, it was a warning. Something inside carried a weight that he recognized but could not explain. The soldiers hesitated. In the silence of the mountains, the container almost seemed to hum, its presence heavy in the cold air. They fetched tools to pry the frozen locks. Metal screeched against metal as they forced leverage, sparks flying against the snow. Each sound was swallowed quickly by the night, but to the men it echoed like thunder. The first latch cracked open, then the second. The dog leapt back slightly, nose pressed low to the ground, tail rigid. His body language spoke volumes. Whatever was inside, it was not ordinary. The soldiers steadied themselves. Then, with one final heave, the last latch broke. The lid groaned as it lifted, ice cracking loose from its edges. For a moment, the torchlight struggled to penetrate the dark hollow inside. Then the light spread across the contents, and every man froze where he stood. Inside were bundles wrapped tightly in heavy canvas, layered upon one another with deliberate precision. Some were small, some larger, each tied with cord that had stiffened under frost. The dog jumped forward, his nose pressing against the edge, sniffing frantically. His bark rang sharp again, echoing down the ridges of the mountain. The men began to cut the cords, unwrapping the first bundle. Within lay a collection of metallic objects, each one carefully packed. At first glance, they resembled old military equipment, radios, encrypted devices, even ammunition rounds that had not seen the light of day in years. But there was more. Alongside them were files sealed in thick, waterproof coverings, stamped with faded insignias that bore no resemblance to their current operations. These were not supplies for the camp. These belonged to another time. The soldiers' breaths grew shallow. They flipped through the pages, their gloved fingers brushing against brittle paper, filled with coded notes, maps marked with red lines that crossed mountain paths, and records of movement across borders. It was evidence of something that had lived in secrecy for decades, but there was one more bundle, larger, heavier. The dog pressed against it before anyone could touch it, pawing desperately as though urging them to see. When the cords were finally cut and the canvas unwrapped, a chilling sight emerged. Inside lay sealed containers marked with radiation symbols, their surfaces corroded but intact. Weapons-grade material, hidden in the snow, buried to escape the eyes of the world. The soldiers stepped back in disbelief. The dog barked furiously, circling, his instincts screaming louder than ever. This was the heart of the mystery, the thing the snow had tried to guard, and the reason his nose had dragged them here. Panic rippled quietly through the men. This was no ordinary find. This was dangerous. The kind of discovery that explained why someone had gone to such lengths to hide it. The questions multiplied in their minds. Who had buried this? Was it part of an abandoned operation? Had someone hidden it deliberately for future retrieval? And why here, so close to their camp? The wind rose, howling across the mountain as though the earth itself mourned what had been unearthed. The torches flickered in the gale, their beams trembling over the metallic shine of the sealed containers. Every sound was magnified, the dogs' growls, the crunch of boots on ice, the heavy breaths of men who now realized they stood in the middle of something far bigger than their camp. Yet the dog would not let them falter. He pressed forward, pawing at the files, sniffing, then circling back to the radioactive symbols. He was not afraid. He was resolute. He had found what was meant to remain hidden, and now he demanded it be brought into the light. The soldiers acted swiftly, sealing the files in protective cases, reporting upward in hushed urgency. They knew this discovery could not be spoken of casually. It had to be handled with care, documented, secured. Yet, even as they worked, the air around them thickened with unease. If someone had hidden these here, could that someone still be watching? The dog's ears flicked suddenly. He raised his head, eyes narrowing toward the ridges beyond the camp. His body stiffened again, the same posture he had shown before the discovery. This time, though, it was not aimed at the snow. It was directed at the darkness stretching beyond the camp's lights. The soldiers followed his gaze, hearts pounding. The ridges loomed silent, snow cascading gently under the moonlight. Nothing moved, but the dog would not shift his stance. His body trembled with alertness, his instincts burning like fire. Something more was out there, something tied to the mystery they had just unearthed. The men stood frozen, caught between securing what they had found and facing what might yet come. The snow beneath their boots felt less like ground now and more like a veil between them and truths still buried deeper. The dog barked once more into the night, a sound that carried both warning and promise. The mystery was not over. It was only deepening. The frozen night dragged on with a weight heavier than the snow itself. Soldiers stood tense around the unearthed container, torches burning low, breaths clouding the frigid air. The files they had uncovered spoke of hidden movements, coded operations, and trails that seemed to snake through the very mountains they now guarded. But it was the sealed, radiation-marked containers that struck fear into their hearts. Dangerous, unstable, and long buried. Yet the police dog's eyes were fixed elsewhere. His body remained locked toward the ridges above. Every muscle coiled, his stance unshaken. He was not barking aimlessly. He was pointing towards something unseen, something that still lingered in the shadows. His instincts told him the story was not finished. The soldiers followed his gaze. The ridges glowed pale beneath the moonlight, serene and silent. But silence in mountains can be deceptive. One soldier adjusted his scope, scanning the slopes. At first there was nothing, then a faint glint, a reflection, as if glass had caught the moonlight. The realization spread quickly. Binoculars or perhaps a rifle scope. They were being watched. The truth snapped into place. Whoever had buried these weapons and files had not forgotten them. The cache was never abandoned. It had been hidden for retrieval. And now, with the dog leading them to the discovery, someone out there had been alerted. The soldiers braced for conflict, nerves on edge. The dog barked sharply again, pacing back and forth, urging them to act. It was not just about securing the find now, it was about survival. The men doubled their watch, lights sweeping the snowfields, rifles raised toward the ridges. The mountain, once silent, now felt alive with unseen eyes. Then came the crunch. Soft at first, but distinct, footsteps in the snow, not theirs. From the ridges above, faint figures began to shift, moving like shadows across the slope. Their presence was undeniable now. Whoever they were, they had come for what the soldiers had uncovered. The tension thickened into dread. Were these remnants of old enemies, guarding secrets of the past? Smugglers seeking profit? Or perhaps operatives tied to missions erased from history? Questions piled up, but answers could wait. The threat was immediate. The dog lunged forward, barking into the wind, pulling hard against his leash. His nose dipped into the snow once more, tracing a line as though drawing a path. He darted toward a narrow section of the ridge near the camp, his body low, urgent. The soldiers realized what he was signaling, an approach point. The enemy was closing in from that exact flank. The men moved fast, following his lead. Snow kicked up under their boots, torches shaking as they positioned themselves. The dog stopped, his body pressed low, ears pinned back. Then, with one explosive bark, he signaled. Shadows appeared, sliding down the slope. Closer now, figures in heavy coats carrying gear that glinted under the moon. The ambush had been broken before it began. The dog had read the mountain better than any man could. Shots rang out in the night, controlled and sharp, scattering the intruders. Some fled back into the ridges, vanishing into the white, while others dropped their packs and disappeared. The soldiers pursued only far enough to ensure safety, then regrouped, the cache still under heavy guard. When silence returned, broken only by the wind, relief spread like warmth through their frozen veins. The camp was secure. The enemy had been driven back, and it was the dog who had saved them all. Without him, the ridge would have delivered the intruders straight into their camp, catching them unprepared. But the mystery was not finished. The files still lay open, marked with coded trails and forgotten insignias. As dawn broke, the first light spilled across the mountains, and a new truth began to emerge. Analysts worked through the night, piecing together what the dog had uncovered. The documents revealed that decades ago, rogue operatives had hidden stolen nuclear material within the mountains, intending to retrieve it when the world's gaze had shifted elsewhere. The operation had failed, lost to time, but the cache had remained waiting. The dog had not only exposed the buried danger, but had also thwarted those who had returned to reclaim it. His nose, his instincts, his refusal to give up had rewritten what might have been a tragedy. What was hidden under the snow was not just metal or paper. It was history, danger, and the power to change futures. With the weapons and files now secured, transported under guarded convoy, the mountain once again fell silent. The ridges returned to their deceptive calm, the snow to its endless blanket. But for those who had stood there that night, the silence would never sound the same again. They would always remember the echo of a bark that refused to fade. As the soldiers prepared to leave, the dog stood proudly at the edge of the camp. His harness catching the morning sun, he gazed over the mountains, ears lifted, as if still listening for secrets buried deep beneath the snow. He had carried the weight of instinct where no map, no scope, no man could. The men looked at him not as a mere animal, but as the reason they were alive, the reason danger had been stopped. His unshaken bark had led them to the truth, connected the dots of history long concealed, and delivered them into safety. The snow no longer hid its silence. It had revealed its secret, and in doing so it had proven that sometimes the sharp nose and unwavering loyalty of a dog can change everything. The camp was dismantled weeks later, but the story never left them. It traveled with the soldiers, written in reports, carried in memories, told in hushed voices of how one dog broke through the mountain's silence. In the end, the mystery was solved, the danger disarmed, and lives protected. The snow had guarded its secret for decades, but it was the bark of a dog that finally broke its grip. And when the men returned home, medals and honors found their way to many. But the truest hero was the one who could not speak of what he had done, only stand tall with eyes bright, chest out, and tail steady. The dog had done more than uncover a secret. He had rewritten destiny. If you made it this far, you already know every story here hides something deeper. And trust me, the next one is even more unbelievable. So don't miss it. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell before the next mystery drops. And if this story gave you chills, smash the like to let me know you're ready for more.